circle arrow, we're Zion Church. We're at Zion Church. Now the Zion Church is going to be where in the first battle, the Union are going to set up their artillery in the area of the Zion Church. So the Zion Church is going to take damage from the enemy artillery fire and use as a hospital. So when the Confederates fall back from the initial position, they're going to pull back to where you can see them on the map. It's going to be, you can see the Rogers House, you can see the Zion Church, and when they pull back, they're going to take position to the north of us. Now, all of Cruft's people have now arrived. So you have now 8 Union regiments on the field. No longer like you had initially in our first position of 4 regiments with only 3 finally, with as Manson makes his errors and shifts the 69th Ohio, 69th Indiana from the west of the road to east of the road, leaving only 3 regiments, then to be reinforced by the 95th Ohio, too late. So as the Confederates pull back and take another, the Federals pull back and take another position, this is going to be up by where we stopped at the Visitor Center, which in the area there, which was near the Rogers House. And there we can see the Union taking position there with Manson's brigade on the west, on the east side of the road, and Ruff's men on the west side of the road. The people who are going to be the heaviest engaged again on the Confederate side as we move into the second phase of the battle. We're now into the probably around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, between 1 and 2, and it is a very, very hot day. And the Union soldiers are a lot less used to soldiering than the Confederates. Also, you have to remember, they did not know about dehydration. In my war, they did not know about dehydration, and you existed all day. Unless you could steal canteens, you existed one day on a canteen of water. You could only, the government did not give you a second canteen in World War II. You could get them, but you had to steal them from somebody, appropriate them. So there's a different things on. They would have you would have dehydration, but dehydration wasn't recognized at that time. The Confederates, and it was a drought on the area here, and the Confederate task is going to be to continue to keep the pressure on the Yankees. Our friend Bull Nelson, I don't see him. We shouldn't see him here. We won't see him, and I hope our friend over there who played him last night can produce Bull Nelson when we get up to the cemetery. So you can see it's going to again be, McCrae is going to be again center stage, and he's going to use Humphreys' Arkansas battery, because the Union is going to, for a while, stabilize the situation. McCrae is going to continue to attack going to against the Union right. The Union right is going to particularly punish several of McCrae's regiments on McCrae's rather difficulty, but in the end, the Federals will have to abandon this position and fall back to closer to Richmond, where we'll make our last stop when we leave here. Now, someone brought up cavalry. Yes, our friend Colonel Metcalf with the 7th Kentucky and the 2nd Cavalry Regiment is here, but they're not doing much good. I would say they're are not passing muster on covering the Union flanks. Metcalf is still, and his men are badly shaken from their adventures on the 23rd when they had been routed by Scott as he comes down Big Hill. Worse now, for them, Scott has now been detached. And when we go to and Scott's men are taking position north of Richmond to be in a position when and if the Union troops that have already been driven from position 1 and will eventually be driven from where we are now, position 2 at the Rogers House, and if they cannot hold that position at the cemetery and it becomes root hog or die, Scott's men are going to glom on to most all the 4,400 Union soldiers are going to be captured. Now we'll turn it over to Will, and then we're going to walk quietly around the church because they're having sessions, and I don't want to compete with the pastor there. But as our host says, they'll probably invite us in and then pass the collection.
Well, all I have for you is about 120 seconds worth of descriptions of Yankees running, which I think you get the idea that that was the theme of these first 2 stands. This is a surgeon who was with Churchill's division who describes the fleeing Federals from the line here. He said the Yankees fled in the wildest confusion and disorder, leaving knapsacks, swords, pistols, hats, and canteens enough scattered along the road to have marked the route they traveled, even if they're dead and dying, and not too plainly showed the way. General Cruft has this to say: the flying masses drifted up the road and through the field in the direction of Richmond. General Manson and myself rode forward, endeavoring to stay the flight and panic in every possible way. Our respective staff officers and some of our field officers of the various commands nobly assisted in this hopeless task. The retreat from this point very soon degenerated into a complete rout, and no effort was made to rally the men until in sight of the town of Richmond. And a Hoosier soldier said our men were thoroughly exhausted. This is in keeping with Ed's observation that they weren't drinking enough fluid. The burning sun shone fiercely down, while clouds of dust filled the air. Men were scattered around singly or in squads. Wounded men were straggling along or resting in shady places. And I think what's remarkable is not so much that these Federals were routed from their position, but that they were able to make stands as long as they were. And as we will discover in our last pause here near the cemetery, the toughest stand that the Federals made throughout the entire battle was the last one. You might think that by then they were completely demoralized. Half the Federal Army will be unable to continue the fight, but the remaining half will put up a very stout resistance and be able to turn back the initial Confederate assaults there until they're finally overwhelmed. And Colonel, I understand from our local expert that the best way to go past the cemetery is to continue on through town to get to the interstate off of exit 90.
Exit 90.
Something like
and
that.
And you'll be able to see the courthouse.
Yeah.
That's the same courthouse was here at the time. The fence that's in front of the cemetery was around the courthouse at the time where they kept the Union prisoners. When you start getting out of town and you start seeing a golf course on your left, right in that area is when they started capturing them all. Most people, when they ask me, I say they call me Cracker Barrel. That's basically where it was. The Union Army, the only thing that kept the Union Army together was the road. There was no unit cohesion by this time. They were just a mob going out the road, and Louisiana Cavalry basically came up and said, "Where you boys think you're going?" And they said, "Just forget it." Manson gets wounded out there, his horse falls on him. That's what happened. So.
But a few did make it to the river, right?
A few went out another way and made it to Winchester. Kruk went that way with about 500 fellows. So, but the rest of them were captured en masse, just as out there, out here. They were everywhere.
Are they all seen parole?
Yes.
They were issued paroles at a home that the city owns. It's very dilapidated. There's a picture of it in blue and gray. Our Gettysburg connection is the next division coming up was under Brigadier General Harry Heath, and he was left here to do the paroles. He didn't like it out here, so he petitioned, went back to Virginia, and we all know what happened with him.
At this time, the Dix Hill Cartel, signed in mid-July, is in effect. And that is, if you capture prisoners, they will be paroled and allowed to get back to their own lives the best way they can. And then they will be the responsibility of their side until exchange. If, however, their side, without waiting for the formality for the exchange, you are automatically, if captured again, executed, and it's not a war crime. The example of that is the Egyptians during the Napoleon's campaign in Egypt. The French will capture some 5,000 Turks. The Turks will be paroled, but not exchanged, and unfortunately at El Arish, they will be captured again, and they will be formed in a mass, with the French cannons surrounding them on three sides. And for 50 years after that, you can see the whitened bones of these 5,000 Turks. It's assault will not control that exchange meant. So they are exchanged. And if you're exchanged, you look like you're an exchange prisoner. You ain't going home to see mom and the kids. You're going to go to a parole exchange center, and you're going to stay there and be on S details till you're exchanged. The worst things than being in the Army.
And there's some of those exchanges when they were rank for rank were like the Ernie Broglio for Lou Brock trade. Ended up getting a pretty bad general exchange.
Okay?
You had to bring that up, didn't you?
Go around the white fence, and the buses are parked on the asphalt road just...
Cemetery coming into town, and we're at the courthouse. So everybody should have no trouble if they brought these maps. He even has a better one there. Paul's always this smart and brings his map. So, Nelson has arrived. It's 4 p.m. and he's not in a good humor. He sees panic-stricken Indians like that man. And he's going to whack some of them across the backside. And they're going to form up with about 2,200 men, just as Ray can see them in the edge of the cemetery. We are right here. And the Confederates are going to come up. It's been a long day on both sides. And the Union is going to hold on fairly well. Nelson is going to see a cringing man like Sikorsky there. He says, if they can't hit me, you don't have to worry. Can't hit you. But a number of minutes after that, luckily has big thigh, as any person 300 yards would, and he's going to take 2 flesh wounds in the thigh, and he's out of here. And he'll be captured, but will not be kept. He would probably been better off if he'd been captured. And the Union will gain an hour or so before they break. And when they break, That's when it's going to be root hog or die north of here, because Scott and his cavalry have been there for several hours waiting for this to happen. As the men come fleeing back, they're going to capture 4,400 people. And when you're captured, you're going to be brought here. And here you will be paroled. And Nelson will, after he escapes, he's going to talk about the cowardly Indianans and boast how he whacked and cut down the number of Indianans. So you know why Governor Martin is here with General Davis. Again, Indiana, they may have set up.
Well, here we are in the heart of a town of 900 people in 1862, county seat of Madison County, and had we been here 5 o'clock in the afternoon of August 30th, 1862, we would have seen an unforgettable sight. As one witness said, backward swept the tide of battle through gardens, among yards trimmed with beautiful flowers, around houses, through streets and cemeteries, places the most holy and the most profane were alike strewn with bleeding corpses. The rout that ensued when the federal troops fled in panic from the Richmond cemetery may sometime have been paralleled in history, but surely can never have been exceeded. It beggars description. Driverless teams of maddened horses hitched to heavily laden supply wagons, running in aimless terror, spread still further dismay and confusion in the road that were already blocked with fleeing throngs of panic-stricken men, and etc. And as that indicates, the count was 4,303 prisoners captured north of town and paroled here. Kirby Smith's campaign has been successful at Richmond, and now he goes forward 3 days later into his goal of arriving at Lexington to liberate the Kentuckians and to spread his 25,000 small arms among the volunteers just aching to join the Confederate Army. And when one of those Confederates gets to Lexington, he says, "Our entrance into town was a perfect ovation. Streets, windows, and gardens were filled with ladies and little girls with streamers of red and blue ribbons and Confederate flags, and hundreds of our men were presented with shoes and hats and coats and tobacco." But he adds with a little less enthusiasm, "We could not fail to notice, even then, that the crowds gathered to greet us were composed for the most part of women and children. The men, the bone and sinew of the land, the substantial property holders, even those who sincerely sympathized with the Confederate cause, with a few honorable exceptions, held cautiously aloof, while the Union men, the most violent of whom ran away on our approach, kept closely in their houses." And as we know, the high point of Smith's incursion in the Kentucky campaign occurs here and with his entrance into Lexington. And from this point on, things begin to go downhill for Kirby Smith, who has no plan B. And he will remain in Lexington, sending out a few troops north towards Cincinnati, enough to scare the people in southern Ohio, but never challenge those defenses. And then the focus of the Kentucky campaign shifts away from Kirby Smith and on to Braxton Bragg and Munfordville and Bardstown and Frankfort and finally Perryville.
One question, then we're going to have to go.
What happened to Bull Nelson? Maybe you said, but I didn't hear it.
What happened? What happened to Bull Nelson?
Bull Nelson is captured momentarily and will escape and proceed back to Louisville and resume his actions of organizing troops for the defense of Kentucky. And that is when this guy, Jefferson Columbus Davis, reports to him. And we heard that interview they had, in which Nelson is asking these questions, and Davis is not answering them. things that he was known to do. And Nelson will tell him, go report to General Wright. He'll report to General Wright, and Wright will tell him to go back to report to Davis. And when he goes back to report to Davis, he'll be accompanied by the governor of Indiana, Oliver P. Throckmorton. Yes, I said Throck. For being a politician, he got rid of the Throck. And that is what he alluded to. Maybe they're setting Nelson up, knowing he has a vicious temper, knowing that he's insulted Indiana, and he has a person that has a equally vicious temper, and knows that a pistol is an equalizer. And that'll all be played out in the lobby of the guardhouse on the 28th day of September.